Oh, fantastic. Okay, so on the screen, you will see what was my pride and joy when I was living in Wellington and I was studying. At the time, I wasn't actually a Christian. I was a very staunch atheist. And I had this thing called a longboard. So the idea of a longboard is that it's a skateboard, but it's for maximum speed. So it's got really big wheels. And the idea is you find hills of varying steepness and you go faster and faster the bigger the hill is, right? So when we were living in Wellington, my friends and I, we had longboards and we would just go and we'd try and find steeper and steeper hills that we could go down on our longboards, and we would go extremely fast. Now, something you will notice about this longboard is that it does not have any means of stopping. So once you're committed to a hill, you're pretty much stuck going down at extreme speeds with minimal ability to stop. So this is, you may have been here before. This is Kelburn campus. So this is in Wellington. And on the right of the screen, can you see my mouse? Yes. You can see you've got this extremely straight, extremely steep, perfect piece of concrete. And it goes right through the university. So as you're skating down it, maybe the girls can see you, who knows, right? But what we did was I lived right at the top of the hill. So we would get at the top of this hill and we would bomb it straight down, wait till there were no cars, and we would just go down at full speed. And once you're committed, you're going super fast down this hill. And yeah, there's not much you can do to stop. So one day I was skating down this hill and I picked up full speed. So I'm going to flip the camera around, right? This is going down the hill. So see how there's this big hairpin turn? So on this screen, you can see that you have this massive hairpin turn at the end of the hill, which means you've got to lean the board right back and you come around the corner like super fast. So at the bottom of this hill, I'm about to turn right. And do you see where the black car is? Where that black car is, a massive rubbish truck came out. And it's like humongous, made out of like the heaviest, scariest looking metal imaginable, like heavy duty, massive truck, right? And the truck, it decides to turn right down this road here as I'm bombing this hill, as I'm going full speed down this hill. And I'm going to try and turn right, but there's this truck that's going to cut me off. And I'm like, oh man, I'm done. I'm dead. It's over. Right? So this truck, and it slowly pulls out, and I'm going full speed down the hill. And the truck, I come in and I lean back as the truck's pulling in. And honestly, the corner of the truck is like a centimeter away from my neck, and I just make the corner. And I'm like, there's no way that that is common occurrence. How is that possible that I survived that at such a hair's breadth, right? I was right on the brink of like pretty much certain death or like absolute destruction of my body, right? But somehow I managed to make it out of this situation. And the thing is, that's not the only hill I bombed. We were doing this for years, and somehow I've come out of it relatively unscathed. So I'm going to introduce this concept that people in the world would say for this, and it's the idea of serendipity. Now, serendipity is the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. So I'm going to define it in this situation as me somehow by chance just managing to miss this massive truck that totally should have taken me out, right? And I reflected on this and I thought about this for a while after. I was like, I shouldn't have survived. Is this just a random occurrence? How is this like possible? So we're going to explore this idea of serendipity, and maybe by the end of the exhort, I might change the definition so it's a little bit more, I don't know, we'll look into it. Okay, so I've gone through the internet and I've found a few other examples of this happening. So I've just got some GIFs or GIFs that I'm going to just show you. So this first one, there is a child on the ground here. So you see this child, and this child, it falls over in the middle of the street. you can see it, falls over, and a car comes out, and it just so happens to just miss this child. Is this a serendipitous event? Is it just a beneficial by chance? This next one, there's a red light. This motorbike goes through, somehow misses both of these vehicles and somehow comes off completely unscathed. Right? So let's have a look at Psalm 145, verse 9. So it's from that reading that we just had a look at. And it says in verse 9 that the Lord is good to all and has compassion on all he has made. So if you read through that chapter, there is like the whole chapter, it's not talking about how God is only good to Christians. It shows that actually God's grace extends out to all of his creation. God really deeply cares for everybody that he has made. And I think that for me, I've been pondering about that, and I've been considering, I don't know, how much God cares for everybody, because sometimes we sort of just think, oh, he's looking out for Christians, but no, he looks out for us to a huge level, but he has this manifold grace that exists in the world, right? It seems in our lives, if we look back, we could probably think of times, and most people could think of things that really it's unlikely that they should have made it out, but God's grace seems to extend out to everybody. Okay, I got another one. Oh man, it started at the wrong point. So this one here, this guy, he falls off his bike. He gets hit over by a truck, and somehow the truck like just misses him, and the wheels perfectly go over his body. So look at him, he's completely fine. He's so confused. Right? This next one here, the guy gets out of his car, another car comes off the road, and he just misses it. So let's have another look at a verse. So in Acts chapter 14, verses 16 and 17, again, it's this concept of God caring for the people in the world. So it says, in past generations, he allowed all the nations to go their own ways, yet he did not leave himself without a witness by doing good, by giving you rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying you with food and your hearts with joy. And I think it's a really helpful exercise for us to consider that actually God's grace extends far throughout the world. God has this deep, deep love for all those he created. And he's almost pushing those people in the path of, surely there's a God, guys. Like, you're getting all of this food, you get joy in your life. Things seem to happen in a serendipitous kind of way. So perhaps the serendipity that exists in the world is God hinting at the fact that he exists to people that don't believe in him. Okay, let's look a couple more gifts. So this building explodes. People happen to just get out of the way. This is the final verse that I want us to look at of just God's general serendipity or grace that extends around the world. It's from the Sermon on the Mount. So that you may be like your Father in heaven, since he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So I think the world today, I've brought up this concept with some of my atheist friends, and I was like, well, surely you guys see that the world seems to be too nicely tipped in our favor or in humankind's favor, right? Events seem to occur in such a way that is beneficial overall. And I think the world today is very much driven by skepticism, science, and reason, such that they'll try and justify how, for example, my friend said, I don't know if this is an appropriate comment. Yeah, it is. My friend said, well, it's because you're a white male that everything seems to go your way. Or someone else said, well, we only look at the occurrences where good happens because that's evolutionary. You kind of ignore all of the bad things that have happened. But I think that it's a really helpful exercise for us to really consider how much God has done for us and how well structured and serendipitous the world actually is, or our lives seem to be. Things just work out in our favor, and we're going to explore that a little bit more. So my conclusion from the first part is, I think that there exists a universal grace in in this world, right? And I think that God is at play or in action in everybody's life in these serendipitous things that happen. So, here's another one. This one's crazy. Like it's unreasonable how convenient. The door even opens to dodge this lady's head. And nothing, no harm whatsoever, just a small bump. Crazy. So I want you guys, I'm going to give you maybe half a minute, and I want you guys to reflect. And I want you to try and think of a time when God's grace was at work in your life. Right? So you're like this cub being protected by its mother from possibly its father or a lion. Right? So I want you to try and reflect. Was there a moment in your life where, wow, that really shouldn't have happened? Like my longboarding incident. And I mean, for example, the fact that I've ridden a longboard and ridden a motorbike in all of these different countries for so long, and I'm unscathed from all of that, seems to me very serendipitous. So I want you to just think of a time when God's grace may have been at work in your life or someone else's life that you witnessed. Okay, cool. So hopefully you could think of something. It could even be something that happened today, like something that you're like, man, that's just beautifully convenient. Okay, so serendipity seems to exist in the world, right? Things happen by chance in a very beneficial way. Here's another story for you. So I was traveling around the South Island. Was it earlier this year? Yeah, in December of last year and earlier this year in January. And one night we were in Tekapo, and we'd set up a campfire outside our tent where we had our camp. And it was real late at night, and my friend had gone to sleep, and I was just sitting by the campfire reading a book. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, something popped into my mind. And there was really no reason for this to pop into my mind. And it was something popped in that, you should reach out to this girl that you went to university with. So her name, my friend, is Jessie. And we studied together, and we were just really good friends. And it just occurred to me, I haven't spoken to her in like a year, and it occurred to me, send a message to Jessie, say something to Jessie. So I was like, okay. And so I embraced this random subconscious thought that had popped into my mind. And so I sent this message, and it's very cheesy, very, very cheesy, guys. Sorry. So I just fully embraced it, sent a cheesy message that says, hey, Jessie, I was just thinking about how much I like you. You're altogether lovely with amazing potential that you somehow managed to fulfill. Thanks for your friendship. So I randomly sent this message, extremely tacky. You can bully me about it afterward. I feel a little embarrassed putting it up for you guys, but I just wanted to show you it popped into my mind. Say something nice to her. And by the way, there's no romantic interest here or anything. Just want to clarify that, confirm that for everyone. Just a really good friend. And I sent her this message for no reason whatsoever. And this is the response I got in the morning. Well, this is part of the response I got in the morning. She said, what a lovely message to wake up to, Zac. Maybe you sensed that I have been feeling low / having a confidence crisis and knew I needed a pick-me-up. Now, what is this? Maybe I sensed. I mean, I can understand when you can sense someone is feeling down because you see them, you can see their face, you can read their body language. But I hadn't talked to her. I hadn't seen any posts from her. I hadn't no communication whatsoever with any of her friends. She lives in a different country to me. How would I have possibly sensed that she was feeling low and needed a pick-me-up? Right? And you could say this is just coincidence, but I think it's another serendipitous moment for me, right? I think that this is another level of grace that seems to exist within the universe, that God, well, I suggest that it's God, maybe puts into our subconscious like something that we should do, or especially in this scenario, um, the thought to reach out to somebody. And I think that this happens quite a lot. Like, this isn't the only time this has happened to me. It's just a good example I could grab from Messenger, right? And it's that sometimes God just plops like a random thought in our head, and it's something, if we choose to embrace it, it can be really beneficial to other people to do that. So this is from a book I've been reading called The Road Less Traveled, and it's by a psychiatrist called Scott Peck, and he pretty much he talks about how he helped people grow through his practice of being a psychiatrist, and he's also a Christian, so he brings in a lot of ideas from the Bible about how the Bible teaches us to grow and how we can see grace exist in the universe. This is where I got a few of the ideas for this exhort. I've got the book if you guys want to have a read. He says, let us redefine serendipity, not as a gift itself, but as a learned capacity to recognize and utilize the gifts of grace which are given to us from beyond the realm of our conscious will. So I was at the campfire consciously. I'm just thinking about the book I was reading, and it wasn't this book, by the way. It was a random other book. I was reading a random book, and it just popped into my head. And it wasn't my conscious thought. It was something probably in my subconscious, or something serendipitous from God. And I recognized it and utilized it and treated it as a gift of grace that God had given me. And I took it and ran with it, right? And I think that that's something that can be really helpful for us, right? So maybe we are sitting in the shower. I feel like the shower thoughts is the best way to describe these moments. You know, when you're in the shower and like random things pop into your mind, right? So I think that a lesson that we can learn from this is that we should be able to embrace serendipitous occurrences, right? He said, let us redefine it for utilizing these things when they pop into our mind. So when I had this random subconscious thought to get in touch with her, it turns out she really needed a pick-me-up. So why don't we embrace these things when they pop into our mind? So let's think about this ecclesially. So ecclesially, I think this happens all the time. I gave this exhort or something similar down in Hamilton, and a lot of people came up to me afterward and they're like, that happened. This exact thing happened to me. There was a brother that we hadn't been in touch with for over a decade, and I got the thought to send a random message. I sent the message. Turns out he was wanting to come back and get like interested in the Bible again. And it seems random, but maybe we can treat it as a serendipitous occurrence, and potentially it's from God. And we could say, well, maybe this is God calling out for me to go and do this thing, to go and reach out to people. And I think this can be really beneficial ecclesially. If you get an idea to reach out to someone in the ecclesia, do it, embrace it. It's not too hard to pick up your phone and send a message. Well, I mean, I have problems doing it a lot, to be honest. I really want to improve on this. Just if it comes to your mind to do something nice for someone or to reach out to someone, go for it. Why not? You should embrace this serendipitous occurrence that comes to you. So a really good example I can think of something popping into someone's head is the idea of Samuel. Let me scroll down here. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 3. I mean, another good example would be, I think it's in like Acts chapter, is it like 16 or 17, when as the Macedonian man is calling out. I think that's another really good one, but I'm just going to stick with this one for now because we've got limited time. 1 Samuel chapter 3 and let's start at verse 8. The Lord called Samuel a third time, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down." And if he calls you, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And I think that that could be a nice comment that we can have in our mind. If something pops in our head, something like positive to do for someone else, let's embrace that. Let's listen to perhaps God calling out to us. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." I'll reach out to that person for you. Yeah, so I think that that's a really nice little thing. So the book says, it is a major thesis of the section that grace, manifested in part by valuable or agreeable things not sought for, is available to everyone, but that while some take advantage of it, others do not. So that's what I want to hone in on. If these random thoughts to reach out to someone pop into your mind, it's only serendipitous if you act on it. If you don't take advantage of these serendipitous moments, it's wasted, right? And it's easy to be caught in your circle, as John Popper would say, just living your life and doing your basic things. But to branch off onto the line is to take an opportunity when it is presented. So if this thought pops into your mind and it's a positive, good thought, I reckon go for it. Take advantage of it. Grasp it. Okay, so that's my second point. Take advantage of serendipitous moments as they occur. Okay, so this is my final point, and I think this is a bit of an analogy which I'm twisting a touch, but I think a rose could be thought of as something serendipitous. It's just so beautiful how it occurs, but the rose is the easy part of serendipity to see. Wow, this good or positive, beneficial thing happened to me, right? And it's the rose, and you go, wow, that's amazing, positive. But I think as Christians, if we really want to see God's grace, we need to realize that sometimes his grace comes in the form of a thorn on that rose. So even though roses are extremely beautiful, they have these thorns that grow on them as well. So yes, it's easy to see things that are beautiful as serendipitous, or things that are good as serendipitous, but perhaps as Christians, we need to level it up and start to realize that perhaps the bad things that happen are God working in our lives even more. Maybe he wants even more growth, and it comes in the form of a thorn. So let's read an example. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and it's literally talking about a thorn. So 1 Corinthians chapter 12. No, it's totally 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I think my notes are not good. Okay, and we'll start at verse 7 and we'll read till verse 10. It says, to keep me from becoming conceited. Oh, no, wait. Start from verse. Oh, yeah. Because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Beautiful. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest in me, or on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So for people in the world, serendipitous events are always the rose. But when we look at Paul, he starts to focus more on the thorn. And he reads in verse 10, he says, I delight in weakness and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties, because in that weakness, perhaps that's the biggest opportunity for God to actually be able to shine through. Because, in fact, Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you. This grace shines through our weakness. So maybe as Christians, we can see these serendipitous acts of God's, and then we'll level it up again and we'll say, maybe these things that I perceived as negative are actually the largest case of serendipity. Maybe this is God really trying with me to help me grow and become more like Christ. Right? So a great example of this, and I want to start turning our attention now, is Jesus Christ, right? Because he was crucified in weakness, but he lives because of God's power. So in fact, we could look at Christ. The most serendipitous event that actually happened was the worst event for him. But that was the event that got him elevated into the position that he's in now to be able to help us. So actually, this event that may have been the worst turns out to be the most serendipitous. So it's totally flipped, right? And so as a result, for us, we are now the weak ones, and Christ is able to give us his grace. So that's us. I mean, I got a little picture of a joey of a kangaroo, because if you are just a small, weak joey, that's when you're allowed to sit in the pouch. When we become strong, or something more, then maybe we aren't able to take on that grace fully. So let's reflect on 3 points. Actually, no, let's redefine serendipity first. So we initially defined serendipity as, where are we? The occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. So I'm going to try and redefine it now from the lens of a Christian, or from what I think serendipity seems to be to me. And I think it's the occurrence and development of events by God in a not always happy, but always beneficial way, right? I think that God is certainly working in our lives, whether we see it or we don't. And he's always working for our growth. He's always working because he wants to give us his grace, right? And although we may be weak, God is there to strengthen us, and he is there working through Christ. So let's reflect on 3 points. The first point: God seems to be at work in our life, protecting us from harm's way. And that extends to everybody in the world. Serendipity seems to be at work in the world. Secondly, we should try and embrace these serendipitous occurrences. When these things that are seemingly random or by chance happen to us, maybe if they're good, let's learn to grasp them. For example, when I was by the campfire, let's send that message out to someone when they may be in need of help. Right? Let's embrace something a little bit more on the subconscious level, right? Reach out to people. And finally, let's recognize that sometimes we are given weakness so that Christ's grace may cover us, so the separate serendipity may cover us.